What's up, nerds? It's Mike with NerdFellas, and today I want to talk to you about Star Wars The Last Jedi. Now, I did see the film opening night, and I plan on seeing it several more times, and I have to tell you, well, I'll go ahead and wait. Let's just get into it. There's a lot of love and hate for the new installment in the Star Wars saga. I mean, director Rian Johnson, who directed such films as Brick and Looper, which I really like, has taken what we know about a galaxy far, far away and expanded, if not, turned it on its head. The trailer for the film says it all in the line from Mark Hamill, who plays Luke Skywalker, when he says, "This is not going to go the way you think." This line cannot be taken lightly. I mean, the truth of the matter is, the film has split fans into lovers, haters, and trolls. I mean, you can even thank Rotten Tomatoes for that, because this film gets critical acclaim, yet the fans seem to be against it. And it could be a result of trolling, but that's neither here nor there. Either way, numbers speak for themselves, and the film had a whopping $450 million worldwide opening at the box office for the weekend. And that's $220 million domestically. So, I mean, a lot of us went to the movie theater to see this film. And who wouldn't? It's a new installment of Star Wars, so we're going to be out there. We're going to go watch this. But some fans hated it so much that they've gone so far as to petition. They're petitioning for the film to be removed from Star Wars canon. That's major. And sometimes I think, could we, the fans, be to blame? I mean, there's so many of us out there. We have so many awesome, crazy theories, and I love reading them. I love coming up with my own theories. And, you know, what if the executives at Disney, Lucasfilm, they're listening, and they're thinking, my God, these guys thought of everything. What can we do to surprise these guys? And sometimes I think what we share online, what we think, what we hope to see, shapes the story that they come up with. And it feels like the studio decides that, okay, we're going to go in a different direction for the sake of surprising the audience. And that is probably pretty bad. And the bottom line is, The Last Jedi could be, or is, a good film, but the main question is it a good Star Wars film? Now, I assume that you did see the movie, so I'm going to go over very detailed plot points and share my thoughts, the good, the bad, the ugly, about what I thought about Star Wars The Last Jedi. So, fair warning, I'm going to have spoilers, so if you do not want to know anything about this film because you haven't seen it yet, stop listening, okay? That's a fair warning. And, you know, you guys already know about the whole story if you've already seen it, so I don't need to go over the plot. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, many say the film is a rehash of The Empire Strikes Back, but I beg to differ. I agree. There are a few plot lines and sequences that mirror Empire Strikes Back. I mean, and there's no doubt about that. I mean, for one, both films have similar openings where the rebels and the resistance are escaping from the Empire or the First Order during an evacuation from their base. Luke, he sought out training from Yoda, and Rey sought training from Luke. There's another one. What about Luke saw a Force ghost in Obi-Wan, and then, now again, Luke saw the Force ghost in Yoda. Okay. You know, it's kind of similar. Luke fell into a hole, and he faced a vision of Darth Vader, where he ended up seeing himself beneath Vader's mask, where Rey also fell into a hole, and faced a vision where she asked to see her parents, but only saw herself. Then, the rebels, they were betrayed by Lando Calrissian, and trapped by the Empire with little hope for escape, whereas the Resistance was betrayed by DJ and trapped on their ship with little hope for escape. We also have Luke, who arrives to save the day on Cloud City and faces off against Darth Vader. And again, Luke saves the day and faces off against his nephew Kylo Ren. In the end of Empire Strikes Back, everyone escapes in the Millennium Falcon, whereas in The Last Jedi, everyone also escapes in the Millennium Falcon. Moving on. I'm going to take another sip of my coffee here. I'm drinking out of my Darth Vader mug, for those of you wondering. I'm sure no one was wondering that, but there you go. So, let's get into a couple of the bad things. There's a lot of stuff floating online about what people, really hated about the movie. What took away from this movie, and some of it's nostalgia. I mean, bad nostalgia. I'm talking prequel nostalgia, and most of that actually lies in the subplot on Canto Bight with Finn and Rose when they go and try and find a recommendation from Maz Kanata. So basically, Canto Bight basically looks and feels like a prequel movie scene or planet, because it's filled with this kind of quirky, kiddish humor, and the creatures and the alien characters are the scenes. They're all just overrun with CGI, and it takes two heroes which aren't. I mean, they're liked, maybe not as liked as others, but it takes Finn and Rose on basically a pointless journey. So what ends up happening is they meet DJ, played by the awesome Benicio del Toro, and he ends up being this two-faced, stuttering hustler / thief. And everything about this subplot felt like it was added to get more screen time, but more so to establish a little foundation. And this is just me trying to weigh both sides of the spectrum. One, it builds a relationship between Finn and Rose, who could be romantically involved later on. And we see this, in the end when Finn is literally about to kill himself and throw himself into this cannon in one of the final scenes, and Rose knocks him off course and then gives him a kiss before she passes out from the crash. So, I mean, there's definitely a future there. I mean, Rey's moving in a different direction. Finn seemed to have a thing for Rey, but, now here's Rose. So, there could be something there. And, I mean, it's very well established or shown that there's going to be something there. So, expect that in the next film. 2, it does introduce us to some young slaves, much like Anakin, when he was a young slave. And these guys could be the future Jedi Padawans, in all honesty. I mean, and we don't really know this, but you get that feeling when you first see them. They don't show any abilities up front, but you know that these kids are being treated poorly, and you get that feeling that there's something special about them. And it's revealed at the end when one of the kids uses the Force to get a broom and starts sweeping, and then looks up into the sky and sees either a spaceship or a shooting star. So automatically, hey, these kids could be the future. Finally, it's this whole plot seems to be like a lesson taught to our heroes about knowing who to trust and when to fight, and to not underestimate their abilities, or to know their limits or roles, especially in the Resistance. Another big takeaway is that we get a glimpse into the nitty-gritty of war through the eyes of DJ, and as Finn discovers when DJ, arrives and with BB-8 and saves them and takes off in a ship that he stole. And DJ reveals to Finn that Canto Bight is filled with weapons dealers who sell to both sides, the First Order and the Resistance. And it's all profit. It's a reflection of what the real world is like, especially what we live in today. and this could apply to anything or anywhere. And it opens the audience's eyes to reveal that behind this fancy curtain where we enjoy watching all the space battles and the one-on-one throwdowns, there are puppet masters and dealers that benefit from all of it. People who don't care who wins or who loses. And it's kind of a hard pill to swallow, but it kind of sheds more light onto, what the battle is. And in all honesty, there's good and bad to this. The good is it opens your eyes to this whole third world where there's these other bad guys. The bad thing is it kind of it takes away from these battles, because now you're like, well, these guys feel like they're fighting a pointless war because there's someone else benefiting from it, and it's kind of hard to understand that or to even accept it. But there's good and bad to that, in all honesty. And then, of course, another aspect of the films that kind of felt out of place or just maybe bad for the film was Poe Dameron. Poe Dameron, the sassy renegade pilot, he doesn't take orders from anyone, not from Leia, not from anyone. And his whole arc is ignoring his commanders, pretty much. Trying to do the right thing, but doing the wrong thing, ultimately, the whole time, pretty much. And learning something at the end of it all. The Resistance is a team, and it's not just a team of 1 or 2 or 3 people or a one-man show. It's supposed to work as an entire unit. And in all honesty, we have to blame Vice Admiral Holdo for Poe Dameron's insubordination. She didn't tell him her plan, and he failed to look out the freaking window to see that she was trying to get them to a planet, somewhere safe where an old rebellion base is. And it's just a weird, out-of-place plot point. And, in the end of it all, what's the payoff for Poe? He finally meets Rey. I guess that's the payoff, because, there's something there. I think that might be the spark that lights the fire. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. Then, we have the villains of the new Star Wars film, and it's like we're seeing the same issues as always. It's always with the weapons, because whether it's a stormtrooper who can't freaking shoot straight or the Death Star that can easily be destroyed, there's definitely a weapons problem. In this film, they slowly shoot at the Resistance ship and wait for it to run out of gas? I don't know. And they have tons of power. The First Order has tons of power, but I guess they just have to recharge and shoot the cannons, recharge, shoot the cannons, and they're just kind of toying with the Resistance and buying time. And it's like, why not just completely destroy them? And is there something else that we don't know that why it's taking so long? But whatever. And, with all this power, it's like, why not use it? The movies going forward could benefit from not having secret weapons or giant ships. Instead, bring us something more terrifying, like the Knights of Ren. They were completely left out of the film. We know that they were Luke's students, and at some point, I'm thinking, let's see these guys in action. Who doesn't want to see Rey fight Luke's old Padawans? So, that would be something I'd really like to see. And the bad guy problem also comes back to seeing the death of, Supreme Leader Snoke. It was a surprise, and it was interesting. We got to see this character, and we got to see his power. This guy had really raw power. His power was so strong with the Force. He was able to connect Kylo Ren and Rey from long distances. And we saw different aspects of the Force that we hadn't seen, but we'll get into that later. And just seeing how he could toy around with Rey, it was like, this guy can do anything. And boom, he's gone, dead. And it's like, really? That was it? Who is this guy? What happened? But anyway, something else fans hated as much as they hated Ewoks are the Porgs. But you know what? Let's face it, the Porgs are better than the Ewoks. Sure, they did not add to the plot of Star Wars, and they did not have any kind of significance other than, representing the peacefulness of the Force, but they did make us laugh, and it gave the kids something to enjoy. It was kind of messed up seeing Chewbacca eating a fully cooked Porg, is what, we could all assume he was eating. They were the same size as the Porgs. So, it's interesting seeing Chewbacca eat a fully cooked Porg while living, breathing Porgs are watching him with watered eyes. But, hey, we got a laugh out of it, and now we know that Chewie eats meat, and he has fingers, as The Force Awakens showed us. So we're getting a little bit more about Chewbacca every time. Now, the biggest of all the gripes comes down to, I want to say 3 or 4 things. One, like I said before, who the hell is Snoke? He was killed off so quickly and surprisingly, and yet we still know nothing about him. It was as if, it would have been at least kind of interesting to find out that maybe he was the first ever Jedi and he was ancient, or maybe even the first Sith. That would have been kind of a nice plot point, and it would have probably given more of a reason not to kill him, but, it still would have been interesting. I don't know. Second, discovering, actually throwing away the fact that Rey comes from nobodies, that just finding out that Rey is no one and that she came from nothing and she came from nobody. It was kind of a hard pill to swallow for some people. It should be okay because Anakin came from no one. His mom was a slave. Although, I'd like to know if he was conceived by the Force or someone who manipulated the Force, and that's how he was created, but, maybe we'll never find out. What was hard to swallow was that it wasn't a journey for Rey to discover the truth. It just was told to her. Luke was able to discover this on his own journey. He didn't know, and the audience didn't know, that Vader was his father. And it would have been interesting to see Rey go on her own personal journey to discover who her parents really are, even if they were nobody. We're told that Rey always knew in her heart that they were no one. They were nobodies. It was a throwaway, but it would still be interesting to meet her parents, or to discover that maybe Kylo lied to her to manipulate her to the dark side, similar in the way that Darth Sidious did it to Anakin. But, there's still another episode, so maybe we'll see something similar. Third, to find out why Kylo betrayed Luke destroyed the legend of Luke Skywalker. To see that Kylo was seemingly betrayed when Luke contemplated killing his nephew just became, it kind of destroyed who Luke is. And to find out that it was just because he felt that the darkness was in Ben Solo, aka Kylo Ren, it didn't feel like that was something Luke would do. After all, Luke brought his father to salvation. He helped the rebels defeat the Empire. He formed a new Jedi Order. And then he threw it all away because he was afraid he couldn't save his nephew? I don't know. But let's think about this. If you spent your entire life working and building towards something, and someone came along that could destroy it all, wouldn't you have some sort of fear of losing it all? Luke is human too, and he had a moment of weakness that could have just passed by if Kylo had not woken up. And let's face it, Kylo was already planning a coup. How did Kylo already have a team of defectors so quickly? How did he have this group? Was Snoke manipulating all of them at once? Did Kylo just run into a building and say, "Hey guys, you want to come with me?" and then burn down the building while Luke was unconscious? Something must have been happening. Something else in the background was happening. And I feel like maybe the story could have been handled a little bit differently. But, this is all going to bring me to the fourth gripe, I guess you can call it. Luke becoming a hermit and cutting himself from the Force completely. It was disappointing to fans to see the legendary Luke Skywalker not give a shit anymore. But Jedi, I think, can get depressed too. They can go through depression. Anakin went through it. I mean, think about this. Luke failed Leia and Han. He failed Ben. He failed the Jedi. And he essentially failed his own father in the end of it all. And everything he built was gone in a moment of weakness and shame. And it's hard to come back from something like that for anybody. The fact that he was able to get back on his feet and arrive in the final moments of the film to save the day was like the strongest and most heroic thing he could have done. There was redemption in his final actions, and his passing into a Force ghost was deserved, in all honesty. We got a final poetic goodbye for Luke. The man overcame his depression. He said sorry to Leia. He kissed her goodbye. Not like in the original trilogy. It was on the forehead. He projected himself through the Force across planets, maybe galaxies, or across the galaxy itself. He was able to project himself, and he did this even after being cut from the Force for so many years. And he was old, and he was weak, and he was still able to make a last stand. And in the end, he saw a sunset similar to the one on his home planet of Tatooine, with 2 suns in the horizon, and then he just vanishes and becomes one with the Force. And it's very similar to the way Obi-Wan went when he became a Force ghost. And it was satisfying to me, and it was unexpected. And it was definitely hated by many people, but for me, it was something real. There's a lot of bad things about it, but let's kind of get into some of the good stuff. Now, there's moments in the film that you can say are metaphors, or at least they try to tell the audience something, and it's specifically aimed at the audience who grew up on the original trilogy. When Luke is given the lightsaber by Rey, as an audience we expect something, but instead Luke literally throws the lightsaber over his shoulder. This straight up tells us to throw out any ideas we know about Star Wars, or what we think we know about Star Wars. Good or bad, that lightsaber toss meant something. And to me that's good. The film presented metaphors of, it's time to let go of what we know about Star Wars. Let's move on, let's move forward, let's tell new stories. And we can tell them in different ways. It doesn't have to be the same way. As long as we try to maintain the essence of Star Wars, which is hard to do. I think it's time to stop comparing to the original trilogy, but we'll see. I will say that I did enjoy the comedy in this film, which I felt The Force Awakens and Rogue One lacked. I'm all for serious Star Wars movies, but the original trilogy did have a balance of comedy and drama if you watch them again, almost as slapstick as the comedy in The Last Jedi. Even when Luke asked Rey to reach out, and she literally reaches her hand out, and Luke decides to tickle her fingers with the leaf and saying, "Oh, that's the Force," and she's saying, "Yes, I feel it. I feel the Force." And then he smacks her hand, and it's like, really? And I couldn't help myself from laughing. And, I have to admit, I was afraid of it at first. I was afraid it was going to go overboard with the comedy, or maybe just too far with the humor. But there was just the right amount. It was funny when Poe calls General Hux from his ship and refers to him as General Hugs, like a hug, General Hugs, and pretends that he can't hear anything that he's saying. I thought of Han asking the stormtroopers how they were doing when he finally shoots it and says, "Okay, it's time to get out of here." In A New Hope, when him and Luke go to rescue Leia, and there was just this right amount of laughs to still be able to take the film seriously. And I feel like that's an important essence of Star Wars, because we were first introduced to these characters that it wasn't very formal. It was casual talk. It was the way we would talk to a friend or someone we didn't know, and it was being rude to somebody, and it was just kind of making fun of somebody, and it just felt very natural. And The Last Jedi tries to touch on that. I mean, it's not as good as it was in the original films, especially with the way Leia would talk to Han or anything like that, but it was close, and I appreciated their effort in the comedy. So I think that's something important, and I hope they continue to do that. And another thing that I think is good is the way we look at the Force. That's changed forever with this film. And you know what? It's a cool thing. I mean, would you rather revisit midichlorians, which I was afraid this film was going to do? I mean, we don't need to hear about it anymore. We heard it once. We don't need to know anything more about midichlorians. Now, it's awesome because the Force is something so vast and so powerful. It's amazing to see what each new film brings to the table. From the very early days, with the first original trilogy, we got mind manipulation, Force chokes, ghosts lifting things, guidance, voices like Luke would hear Obi-Wan. And then in the prequels, Force pushing, Force visions, the creation of life, premonitions like Anakin had, speed running and super jumping, and now with The Last Jedi, we're, I guess you can't really call it this, but it's in a sense like teleportation or image projecting, mind extracting, like what Kylo Ren would do to people, mind melding, like when Snoke would bring Kylo and Rey together, nature controlling, like when Yoda's Force Ghost struck lightning down on the Force tree. I mean, the Force just keeps growing more interesting, and it just makes you wonder what else can it do, and what can people be capable of with the Force. And that kind of leads me into some of the original trilogy callbacks or Easter eggs, if you will, that were just awesome. And there's a couple specific ones. I mean, mainly just two that I really enjoyed. The main one that I enjoyed was the appearance of Yoda, especially that, and the fact that he was in puppet form and that he was a Force ghost, and he was voiced by Frank Oz, and it's awesome. It's unexpected, and when he appears on screen, we get the kind of Yoda that's that kooky oddball, that we originally met. Yoda appears with his wise comedic flair intact, and he has a final moment with Luke, and when that happens, it feels like it's foreshadowing Luke's transition to the other side, and we discover Force ghosts can control the weather, when he summons that lightning bolt. It's kind of sad that he struck this Force tree. It's a tree that Luke had acquired from the Emperor. He actually stole 2 Force trees right after the events of Return of the Jedi, and he gave one to Poe Dameron's mom before Poe was born, and he took the other one with him to the island and planted it there, and Yoda destroys it. I mean, granted, Luke was going to destroy it first, but he hesitated, and Yoda did it for him, and for good reason. But you can draw your own conclusions from watching the film. And in this moment, it's as if Yoda's telling us it's time to let go of what we know or what we thought we knew about Star Wars. And it makes room for new ideas on what the Jedi or even the series as a whole can be. It's like, say goodbye to the old ways and make way for the new. It was interesting because at first it's like, really? Like, why would they destroy the old Jedi texts? And then you realize at the end of the film, Rey took the Jedi texts. They're in the Millennium Falcon. And that was pretty crazy, because that means that she can restore the Jedi, and she can change what the Jedi mean. And it can be, that she can open all these new doors. It doesn't have to be as strict as it was, as long as there's light. So that's another cool aspect. Another moment that was kind of a callback or an Easter egg was when Luke was giving Leia these gold dice that belonged to Han Solo. And it was these gold dice that hung in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. And though there's not really a story behind it, at least not yet, we know that we did first see these gold dice in A New Hope. And since then, it hasn't really been shown, but we finally see it again. And it's something that must have been important to Han, or is kind of like it's just a memory of Han Solo. And, Luke thought it would mean something to Leia, and kind of like a final goodbye to Han. So it's nice to know that Han Solo is not forgotten. He's still missed, and they're still thinking about him. So it's just that final farewell to the scruffy-looking Nerf herder. Did I mention that the battles in this film are probably the best in all the films? I mean, sure, we have the Duel of Fates in Phantom Menace between Darth Maul and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn, which was probably one of the best. But in competition with the battle with Supreme Leader Snoke's Red Praetorian Guards versus Kylo Ren and Rey, I mean, my jaw dropped. I mean, from the moment that Snoke was sliced in half to the moment Kylo and Rey wield the lightsabers and stand back to back to face the Red Praetorian Guards, I was at the edge of my seat. And the fight hadn't even started yet. And this was also the moment we finally saw Red Guards in action, if you really think about it. I mean, they always looked cool, even in the old films, in their classic look, but what damage could they really do? We never found out until now, and the fight was awesome, and hands down, for me, the best moment in the film. I mean, if the Praetorian Guards put up that awesome of a fight, what can the Knights of Ren do? Unless, this is just a random theory, unless the guards were the Knights of Ren, because if you counted them, there were 6 guards guarding Snoke, right? And didn't Rey see a vision of 7 Knights of Ren? 6 of them with Kylo Ren, making 7. Just something to think about. But still, the fun didn't end there. We finally saw Luke in action as he came in to save the day, facing off against heavy Imperial walkers and not getting a scratch after they blasted him. And then he faces off against Kylo Ren without getting a scratch. And, we didn't know at first, but this was just a younger projection of himself. But still, seeing Mark Hamill move the way he did, CGI or not, it just looked amazing. And was more than I actually hoped for, in all honesty. I would have loved a real fight, but the payoff was still satisfying for me when we find that he wasn't really there. This was the second best part of the film for me. But I guess on an emotional level, in particular with Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia, knowing that she's no longer with us and seeing her story and her final performance, it did feel like a goodbye. And we may still see her in Episode 9, and it could be in the form of other shots that had been shot and not used in Episode 8, with some voiceovers from, just a collection of interviews or anything. I mean, there's ways that Hollywood can get away with it. As long as they don't do a CGI Carrie Fisher, I mean, it's still possible. Or they could just jump forward in time. Maybe she passes away, or she already passed away. It's going to be tricky. And as long as they do justice to her and to the fans, because this film did really good with her story as Princess Leia, especially if this could be her last appearance ever. And basically the whole film, if you think about it, was a goodbye to all the old characters and to the old Star Wars that we knew. I mean, Admiral Akbar, it's a trap. I mean, this guy, he was killed. I mean, he was killed when Kylo Ren and his squad went and shot up the cockpit that he was in with Leia. So that was crazy. And then seeing Leia floating off in space and then using the Force to go back to the ship and doing this while she's unconscious. I mean, that was pretty awesome too. Just seeing the fact that, we always knew, but just seeing how powerful she actually is with the Force, that was awesome. But like I said, this is kind of saying goodbye to the old characters. Admiral Akbar is dead. Luke disappears into a Force ghost. And, Leia, sadly, we have to say goodbye to her. She's no longer with us. And it just felt real knowing that Carrie Fisher's gone. So seeing the dedication at the end to our princess in the credits, that choked me up. Well, there you have it. Hate it or love it, Star Wars The Last Jedi has given us a ton to debate and discuss and argue and theorize over for years. And it's a love note and a goodbye to the legacy of the old films, and it opens doors to the new chapters that are coming. And yes, we may still get some prequels, but the continuing saga is forever changed. And honestly, I'm excited to see what's next. What did you think of the film? Let us know, and be sure to come back for more NerdCast with NerdFellas. And may the Force be with you.